Welcome to the Autodesk Vault Connected Workgroups step-by-step lab session. Before we begin, let's talk about some of the requirements for SQL replication. Soon, I will show you that we'll be using two VMware workstations set up with Windows 2019 and SQL 2019. They're not configured in a domain, just a Windows workgroup on the same network. So the replication requirements, this comes from the online help talking about connected workgroups. So for servers not in the same domain, add a local Windows account, not a domain account, for each agent at the appropriate nodes. Use the same name and password at each node. For example, Autodesk Rep. You're going to need a shared folder on the publisher where replication snapshots are stored and shared to remote SQL servers. I've already set this up using a script. You'll need a Windows account on the publisher that has read-write permissions to the snapshot share. Again, I've already set this account up and they already have read-write permissions to the snapshot share. We will talk about this as we're going through it. We need a Windows account that has read permissions to the publisher's snapshot share. Servers participating in the replication environment must be able to resolve remote servers by NetBIOS name. A NetBIOS name requires less than 15 characters or less. They can be alphabetic numbers or numeric numbers. They can't contain any special characters. There's a link in this slide for naming conventions for computer accounts if you need more information. The SQL and HTTP ports need to be open in firewalls for communication between servers. I have a script that will open that up. The script I show in the tips and tricks presentation. I will show them as we're going through, as I'm showing you the machines. SQL Server replication must be enabled. This is an option that has got to be selected when you install SQL or when you install the SQL instance. Without it, if you haven't done it, you can go back and modify the installation, but it does require that feature. Recommendations, previously those were requirements. The recommendations are that the servers are in the same domain or a two-way trusted domain. Again, that's not the situation here. I haven't set up a domain because it just takes too long to set up a domain. It's far easier to get it to work as two separate machines who are just member servers. The servers are assigned static IP addresses so that when they restart, they don't get a new IP address. Use one domain user account for replication and snapshot access. SQL is assigned a static port. Again, we have a script that will help with that. Before we begin, ensure that SQL Server Management Studio can connect to the other Autodesk Vault instance. So if you can think, we would have a publisher and a subscriber. There are some things that you can do to test the connectivity between those two. But if SQL Server Management Studio or SSMS, if you install that on the publisher and it can't connect to the subscriber, and if the subscriber's SSMS can't connect to the publisher, you've got a networking problem. It could be a problem with the firewall. It could be a problem with the network itself. Installing Vault Server is not going to suddenly resolve that. So before you even install Vault Server, after you've installed the SQL instance and you've installed SQL Server Management Studio, check to make sure that the publisher can connect to the subscriber and the subscriber can connect to the publisher. And again, If they can't talk to each other, installing Vault Server is not going to suddenly resolve that. So general observations. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk you through the two machines that I've got. So over on the left, we have our first SQL server. This is called Pub22. And over on the right, I've got a second SQL server. That's called Sub 2022. I'm going to log into the local instance on the publisher. And I'm going to log into the local instance on the subscriber as well. To check connectivity, I'm going to also connect to the subscriber from the publisher. I can connect, and I'm also going to connect from the subscriber to the publisher. Again, installing Vault Server is not going to suddenly make this connection work. Let me just resize these just to make sure that we're making as efficient use of the screen as we can. Okay, all right, so observations. Over on the left-hand side, this is our publisher. Let me just disconnect this to avoid any confusion now that we've verified that the two are talking. Over on the left-hand side on the publisher, we have a Vault instance already installed. I've already got Vault Server installed. Just log in there in the background. So we've got a Knowledge Vault Master, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Vault databases, and 1, 2, 3 Vault library databases. If we expand the system databases, we only have the 4 default databases for a SQL instance. Under replication, we have no publications and no subscriptions. Under SQL Server Agent, we just have the standard SQL Server Agent jobs. On Windows Explorer, if I go to the C drive, you can see I've already created a SQL shared folder. And if I right click and go to Properties, Sharing, Advanced Sharing, and if I look at the permissions, everyone has got full control over this folder. The logic that I tend to apply when setting up SQL for the first time is that I open everything up to make sure that everything is working. So I give everyone full control over the network folder. All of my accounts, I make them administrators on the local machine. I fully understand that most companies, most customers using Vault Server would feel very uncomfortable doing this. The object of me doing this is to get everything working first. Once we have identified, or once we've proved that everything is working from an SQL perspective and also from a Vault Server fully replicated environment perspective, once we've made sure that that's all working, then we can think about locking it down and implementing more, using more secure accounts and turning the firewall off or closing the ports and doing whatever is the company policy to make sure everything is secure and as locked down as possible. So in a nutshell, open everything up when you're setting it up, and then once you're sure that everything is working, lock it down. So let's go back. Another thing that I have done, if I go into computer management, I've created accounts on both of these machines, and it's the same account on both. I've got a user, and that user is called the ADSK rep. It does not need to be a member of the administrator's account, the administrators group, I should say. It just needs to be a local Windows account, or if you're on a domain account. And on this machine as well, I also have exactly the same thing. I don't have a SQL shared folder on the subscriber because that's not necessary. We only need one SQL shared folder, but this user account, ADSK rep, this user account will require access to this SQL shared folder because they will be reading the snapshot or consuming the snapshot. So they need to be able to read. They don't need to be able to write, but they need to be able to read from this folder. So if I open up Windows Explorer, I can go to pub 22, and I should be able to see ADSK IP and put the password in. Oh, I typed the password in incorrectly. Okay, all right, so let me have a look. I've got the password here. Maybe it's because I'm typing it incorrectly. It's because I'm typing it incorrectly. So this is another thing that I've already done. I will make a note in Notepad of all of the important information. The reason that I do this will become apparent later. So I'm just going to leave that there. And again, I'm just using standard passwords here. Once we have confirmed that everything is working, then we can change the passwords later. Okay, so we have talked about the system databases on the publisher. We have talked about the local publications. There's no publications. We've talked about the jobs on the publisher as well. There's just the standard job here. On the subscriber, we have no databases at all apart from the system databases. We have currently no subscriptions or publications for that matter. And again, we still just have the standard SQL Server agent jobs, but on both machines, the SQL Server agent is running. We've talked about the folder, the SQL shared folder. We've talked about the permissions. We can access it. We can read that folder from the subscriber. So we are now in a position where we can now go over to the ADMS console and we can have a look in here and we can start to enable workgroup replication. So to enable workgroup replication, we would, let me just delete that in case it causes confusion. That was from a previous session. So we right click on workgroups and we select enable workgroup replication. So what this is going to do, this is going to create a snapshot of the knowledge vault master from the publisher. It's going to take all of those, all of the information contained within the knowledge vault master, and it is going to put that into this SQL shared folder. And again, this SQL shared folder is going to be, you need to be able to read it from a potential subscriber, but we're not quite there at the moment. So let's go ahead and populate this dialog box with the information. And having to do this multiple times, if you're setting up multiple subscribers, it's quite handy to have all of this information in a, a note file or a text file, but again, I can fully understand the security implications of doing this. This is not something that I would recommend doing in a live environment, but everybody has got their way of working. So I'm going to just paste that in there, and the replication credentials. This is the account that the publisher is going to use to write the snapshot to the network located SQL shared folder. So that account, this Windows account, is that account that I showed here. It's this ADSK rep account. So I'm just going to put the details of that account in here. Now, we've got all of the information that needs to go in there. Now, when I click OK on this, all that is going to happen is the SQL snapshot is going to be created. There is going to be a snapshot agent created on the publisher. The subscriber, nothing's going to happen on the subscriber at this point. All we're doing is we are just doing the first step of setting up the publisher to become a publisher. So let's click OK on this, and this could take a minute or so. My feeling is it's going to be very quick, but let's have a look in here. Already we have an Autodesk replication database. This is the distribution database. Already we have a publication in here, and already we have a whole host of other jobs. So if I right click on here and say view snapshot agent status, we can see that the snapshot is currently being created. Do we actually have any files? We've got some folders, and this is the snapshot here. It's a very long name, and it's being generated as we speak. And if we have a look at these file or the contents of this files, you'll see not much in that one. Open with are we going to see anything in this one? Maybe it's too early. Maybe they exist. Here we go. So information is going in there now. So the entire contents of, I say the entire contents, the contents of the Knowledge Vault Master are now being scripted out. So the idea is that when a subscriber, when a distribution agent on the subscriber is created and then told to consume that snapshot for the first time, it will run these scripts. And these are T-SQL scripts. You could theoretically just copy and start a new query and then paste that query and run it, and it will do exactly the same thing. But that would be a very tedious thing to do. As you can see, there are 284 of these, and this is just the first database. But we can see, if we have a look at the properties of it, we can see that the size of this database, when it's scripted out, is 1.3 megabytes in size. Whereas if we right click on here and we look at the properties of this, we can see that the actual size is 21 megabytes. So that's the size that the database is when it's existing on the SQL instance, but to script it out, it's a lot smaller. So let's have a look in here, and let's have a look at the snapshot agent. That is now complete, fully complete. So we have talked about the distribution database. Automatically, it's called Autodesk replication. This is what the Vault server has done when we enabled replication or workgroup replication. There is a snapshot that has been created. There's also a log reader. The log reader is part of the distribution database. We'll talk about that later. If I was to right click on here and say properties, we can see that this is the log reader agent. Let me just go into here and just refresh that, because I did look at that quite early. Let's have a look in here. So that's the log reader agent, that first one. The second one is the snapshot. If there are any problems with any of these running, we can right click and we can have a look, and we can have a look at the log viewer. And we can see that these have got green circles with white triangles on, which means that there was no problems. But if there were problems, then they would be a red circle with a white X on them or a white cross. But when you select each one of these messages, you get a bunch of information. You get the name of the job, the time that it ran, the duration. You get any messages. These could be error messages or just messages that it's completed successfully. And you can see here that you can look at the other jobs as well. You don't have to come out of this. You can select another agent without coming out. Okay, so that is that. If we look at the snapshot agent and we go to properties and the schedule, we can see that this is scheduled to run every Sunday at 12 AM. So that is Saturday midnight. This time has been chosen because when you run the snapshot, it will consume resources, and the chances are that on a Sunday morning or a Saturday night or a Sunday morning, that typically is when most companies are not working. There's not going to be many users connected at that point. Hopefully that will finish before users start to work on a Sunday or on a Monday. But obviously, if they all run at the same time, it might be a good idea if you know how long they run, and you can find out the duration of each job, the last time it ran, by right-clicking on the job and having a look at the history. And in the history, you can see the duration, just shown that. If you feel that that is encroaching on the time where your users are coming in, you can stagger them or you can change the time. So you can select in here, edit, and you can change the time in here. Okay, what else do I need to take your attention to? We've seen the history, we've seen the log file viewer, we've looked at the SQL shared folder, and we've seen the scripts have been created. And okay, so what we can have a look, we can just do a quick overview, a review of what's just happened. So what we've done when we after clicking enable workgroup replication in the ADMS console, we told the Vault server where the SQL shared folder was. We also gave it the credentials of a Windows domain user account that has both read and write access to it. A snapshot agent was created on the publisher. That snapshot agent then looked at the Knowledge Vault master and wrote its schema and entire contents into script files and placed them in the SQL shared folder. Those script files could be manually run on any SQL server, and they would create a facsimile copy of the Knowledge Vault master as it is on the publisher. At this point, there are no subscribers. All that's happened is that the single site Vault server has been converted into a publisher with no subscribers. The Snapshot agent is also scheduled to regenerate the snapshot every Saturday at midnight or at 12 a.m. every Sunday. The distributor was also set up. The distributor placed a log reader agent on the publisher. The log reader's job is to check the publishing database for any changes. It knows what was in the database when the snapshot was generated. If there are any changes in the Knowledge Vault master, it writes those to the Autodesk replication database so that they're ready to be applied to any subscriber. The log reader is continually reading the publisher's database so long as the SQL Server agent is running. If you stop the SQL Server agent, then both the log reader agent and the snapshot and the distribution agent will stop. It's important to realize that Microsoft SQL supports the publisher and distributor being installed on separate machines. However, this is not supported by Vault because Vault will set up the distributor role on the same machine as the publisher. And Vault does not support moving the distributor to another machine later either. So now we're going to add a work group. So going back to the ADMS console, we select work groups, and in this window we can see a list of all of the existing work groups. So far there is only one work group, and that work group is the publisher's work group. So we right click here and we say add work group. When we add a work group, we can add the name of the subscriber. So in this situation, I'm going to type in sub 22. The work group label is important as well because the work group label can be used for file numbering schemes. So if you want to have a unique file name for all of the files that are created and checked in the first time going into each work group, that's possible using that work group label. Going to specify the remote computer name, sub 22. And again, it is now possible to call the Autodesk Vault SQL instances whatever you like, providing that it's SQL compliant. For the longest time, the default and the only accepted name of the Autodesk Vault instance was Autodesk Vault. So that is considered to be a security risk by a lot of customers using SQL because that's a known instance. So I can fully understand that for a lot of customers, they're going to call it something different. But for simplicity, I'm going to call mine Autodesk Vault. And the remote replication credentials, this is the account that Windows is going to use to read the SQL shared folder. So we've got the remote SQL credentials. So this is the remote SQL credentials are what is going to be used to run the SQL Server agent and the distribution agent on the subscriber. So if that is different, then you need to put in those credentials there. But the remote replication credentials is going to be the Windows account that we created on the subscriber. So it's the details for ADSK rep that we have here. And I'm not going to try and type the password because obviously I've got a different keyboard than than the computer thinks we've got. So when we click OK on this, what is going to happen is the subscriber, or we're going to tell the publisher about a subscriber. The publisher is going to use remote SQL to pass some information over to the subscriber, and that information is going to be, here's the snapshot folder. I want you to create a distribution agent, and I want you to start consuming that snapshot for the knowledge vault master. So it gives it the location of the SQL shared folder location. It gives it the name, or the network location of the SQL shared folder. It also gives it the account that's going to read that information. This is all going to happen very quickly, so I'm going to show you as much as I can in real time. Obviously, if you have a server in London and you have a server in China, for example, the latency between the two is going to be much greater than it is between these two machines. So things are going to happen a lot slower, but let's just see what happens. So I'm just going to click OK here. And here we have a problem. Straight away, we have the publisher and the subscriber are running different versions. So this is my fault. What I will have to do is I will have to update SQL on this machine, and I think I can do that by running Windows updates. What I'll do is I will fix this problem, and once I fix this problem, then we will, or whilst I'm fixing this problem, we'll fast forward and come back later. It won't be long, it'll be pretty quick. Okay, so now that has updated, we should be able to click OK here, and it should now work. So let's start SQL Server Management Studio again on this subscriber. And we should now see, this is connecting to the publisher. So let's disconnect that and connect to the local instance. And we should see the Knowledge Vault Master. There it is. We should be able to see not a publication, but a local subscription, and we should also see the agent. And if we right click on here and we look at the properties, we should see that it's a distribution agent because we're using the SQL pool replication. Okay, we can right click here and say view synchronization status. Because the distribution database is continuously synchronizing, this is the kind of message that we would expect to see for a healthy, successful situation. Okay, so that has all worked. So let's quickly go through what we did. So we right clicked and we said add work group. We specified the location of the SQL replication folder, and let me just skip through. We gave it the name sub 2022. We gave We specified the remote computer name, we specified the name of the SQL instance, and we gave it the remote replication credentials, which is different than the SQL credentials. So the remote replication credentials is the name of the Windows account that is going to be reading the network SQL shared folder with the user account and the password. Because SQL on the subscriber is set up using the default username and password, so that is the SA password with the Autodesk Vault at 26200 password. Just left those all the same. So on the subscriber, we now have a subscription, we also have a SQL Server job, the distribution agent, that we can find located under SQL Server agent jobs. To see the synchronization status, we can right-click on the local subscription and select synchronization status. The subscription status dialog box will show if there are any problems with the subscription. If you right-click in the SQL Server agent and select Properties, you'll see that the category is a distribution agent. Just to remind you that the distribution agent is talking to the distribution server all the time. If the distribution server learns that there are changes on the publisher's database, those changes are written to the Autodesk replication database first. If there are multiple subscribers, they will have distribution agents and they will all copy that new information to their subscribers database. But the most important thing to notice is that there is now a KVM, or a Knowledge Vault Master, on the subscriber. Vault Server is still not installed on the subscriber, but it can now be installed and we can see what we can do. So a review of what's happened so far. When we added the workgroup information in the ADMS console, we made the publisher aware of a new SQL Server that it had no knowledge of before. The first thing that happens is that the publisher starts talking to the new subscriber and it tells it to create a distribution agent. The distribution agent looks at the SQL Snapshot folder and starts executing its scripts. The subscriber's distribution agent creates a new database and also creates a continuous subscription. Once the snapshot has been consumed, the subscriber's distribution agent creates a new database and also creates a continuous subscription. Once the snapshot has been consumed, it switches its attention to the distribution server itself. As was mentioned before, the distribution server will keep a track of all the changes made to the database since the snapshot was created. The distribution looks to see if there have been any changes and then consumes them. At the end of this process, the subscriber's database will be an exact copy of the publisher's database. Unlike merge replication, which was used by Vault Server 2021 and earlier, the databases are not bloated by an additional column in every table populated with row grid information. A row grid was a way to identify each row in each table on each server. This information could greatly bloat the size of a subscriber's database, but Vault 2022 and later don't do this. Replication monitor. So if we right-click on a publication or a publication, we have this option to launch Replication Monitor. Replication Monitor is a useful tool that can tell you the status of replications. It's useful for information and for troubleshooting. After resizing, you can see some useful information. It shows the status of the replication, its name, the performance, the latency, and the last time it was synchronized. If you right click the subscription and select View Details, you can review the information presented, but also notice the 3 tabs at the top. Cycle through them to see the differences between each tab. Of particular interest is the Undistributed Commands tab. Notice the number of commands in the distribution database waiting to be applied to this subscriber. This is the publisher, so it's 0, so no surprise there. It's also a very simple setup. Customers in production environments are going to have much more complicated setups, so this obviously is not a good representation of what you can expect to see in a production environment, but it's certainly helpful. We can also see the estimated time to apply these commands based on past performance. This will show us how long the system thinks it will take before all of the changes on the distributor are synced over. On a subscriber in a production environment, this will be jumping up and down as the number of changes and the data transferred is constantly changing. So what I was talking about, if we come into here and if we go to local publications, right click, and here's Launch Replication Monitor. And you need to select the publication, and yet you've got the status, the subscription, performance, the latency, and the last time it was synchronized. If you right click and say View Details, you have your publisher to distributor history and your distributor to subscriber history. These are, as we know, the publisher and the distributor are on the same machine as far as Vault replication is concerned. So unless there is a serious problem, these are not going to be very useful or helpful to us. What is very useful and helpful to us is this undistributed commands. So as mentioned before, in a production environment where information is being added to the publisher all the time from all of the subscribers, or from users connected to all of the subscribers, the number of commands in the distribution database waiting to be applied to this subscriber is going to be going up and down all the time, and so is the estimated time to apply these commands based on past performance. So maybe useful for troubleshooting performance problems is we can insert a tracer token as well, and this will send packets of information from the publisher to the distributor, tell you how long it takes to get there, and from the distributor to the subscriber. But again, you know, the publisher and the distributor are on the same machine, so unless there is a serious problem with the setup, then this is of limited use to us. We have the status of the agents, and we also can set up some alerts and some warnings. But these are only useful if the server's running. You won't get any alerts or notifications if the server's not running. So that is something that has to be resolved by the database administrator. Okay, so where we are at the moment is we have multiple databases on the publisher. We've got 4 or 5 Vault databases, including the Knowledge Vault Master, and 3 library databases on the publisher. These have not been replicated over to the subscriber. All that we have on the subscriber is the Knowledge Vault Master. On the subscriber at this point, we don't even have Vault Server installed. So no users can connect to it, but what I am going to do is I am going to start the process of installing Vault Server on this machine. So I'm going to have this running simultaneously whilst I'm going through the next step. In the ADMS console connected to the publisher, we can right click here and we can say manage replication. You'll notice that there are some other options here as well. We've got delete workgroup. I can click that. Nothing's going to happen because this is quite a serious command, so it's not just going to happen. The question is, are you sure you want to delete the work group? This is the one that we've just created. So if you say yes, what it will do is it will try and talk to the subscriber, and it will say to the subscriber, can you delete all of your databases, and can you unreplicate everything? So get rid of the local subscriptions and also the SQL Server agent. Sometimes it might be a situation where the subscriber is just not available anymore. Maybe it's been destroyed. And in that situation, then you might not want to spend the time, or you might not want Vault and SQL to spend the time trying to talk to the subscriber. So we have this option to do an unconditional delete. So if the subscriber has been shut down accidentally, for example, if you do an unconditional delete, you could be in the situation where the publisher believes that it's been completely destroyed, but then somebody turns the subscriber on, and the subscriber, it still thinks that it's a subscriber, but the publisher is completely unaware of it. In that situation, then what you would have to do is you would have to remove all of the replication objects manually from this subscriber. The steps on how to do that you can find on the Microsoft website. But for the moment, I'm going to say no to unreplicated because that's not what we're trying to do at the moment. We also have the opportunity to look at the properties, and if the password of the user account on the subscriber changes, we can come in here and we can change that. There are security or password policies that can be implemented saying that the password needs to be changed every X days, 30 days, 100 days, 200 days. When the password changes, you can come into the publisher and you can change the password here. Other options, replication status. This is not as useful as the replication monitor, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. What we are going to do is we're going to click Manage Replication, and I'm going to select some Vault databases that we can send over from the publisher to the subscriber. So I'm selecting 4 databases. You would, once you've selected them, and to select multiple ones, I was pressing the Control button on the keyboard. You can press the Control button, or you can select them each individually and then click right. I've chosen a quick way to do it. So when I click OK on this, what's going to happen is the snapshots for these 4 databases are going to be created. You may remember at the moment we only have one database or one snapshot that's been replicated over to the subscriber. Once those snapshots have been created, distribution agents on the subscriber are going to be created as well, and they are going to be waiting for the snapshots to be created. Once the snapshots have been created, the snapshot agents are going to consume, they're going to copy all of the scripts that are in these folders that are going to appear here, and they're going to create the databases and insert the same objects, the schema as appears on the publisher's database, but they're going to do that on the subscriber. And then once those databases have been completely consumed by the subscriber, the distribution agent is going to stop applying the snapshot, stop reading and writing the databases, and it's going to start looking at the distribution database, and it's going to start doing its full-time job, which is to continually talk to the replication database, the distribution database. It's called Autodesk Replication, for any changes. So if you can imagine, the snapshot is created, and because we don't put any locks, we have this model called the concurrent replication model. So whilst the replication is being, once the snapshot is being created, users can still log into the publisher and they can still create new information. That new information is being inserted into the distribution database, the Autodesk replication database, so that when the distribution agent is finished consuming the snapshot, it knows that there are new changes on the in the replication database, and it will then start using those. So let's go ahead and actually do this. So I'm going to click OK here, and my expectation is that there will be more. When I click refresh on here, there's going to be 4 more publications and 8 more agents here. So let's do that, and if we click on or expand jobs, so far there's only 1. It's not going to do them all instantly. Jobs, still just 1. Replication, local publications, it's still just 1 at the moment. Let's do a refresh. Databases, replication. Okay, so it's doing them. Let's have a look at the replication monitor. We can have a look at the agents. We can see that the inventor samples database is 94% complete. We can also come into here and we can see the snapshot agent status. It's on 95%. Let's go back over to here. It's just in the ADMS console, it's still just saying creating a replica of inventor samples. If we go over to the SQL shared folder, we can just see we've got the samples here. If we do a refresh on the subscriber, we've got a database here. And replication, subscriptions. What happens if we view synchronization status? So that is looking at the replication database now, I believe. So now it's enabling the replication of PDMC sample. So if we do a refresh, we can see the PDMC database is now being, or the snapshot is now being created. If we come over here, we should soon see a 3rd folder. It was being created just as I was talking about it. And my expectation is that that should now be appearing here as well. Local subscriptions, there it is. View synchronization status. So that distribution agent is now working. The Snapshot is still being created, I think. View snapshot agent status. Yep, so we're on 97%. Whilst that's going on, let's see how the ADMS console is coming along, or the installation of the ADMS console. So let's just go ahead and install that. That should take a few minutes. Snapshot agent status of the PDMC sample is now complete. And I think there's one more, enabling replication of security sample. Takes a few seconds for it to appear on the subscriber, but what do we have on the publisher? Local subscriptions, nothing there. Security sample. Let's have a look at the snapshot agent status. A snapshot agent job has not been created. Let's just do a refresh on that. Replication, publications, security sample, view snapshot agent status. That's on 28%. Refreshing helps a lot. And we've got a log reader agent. The log reader agent is reading the transaction log on the publisher. The distribution, the snapshot agent is creating the snapshot. And the snapshot agent is scheduled, just to reiterate, on a Sunday or a Saturday night, Sunday morning. Let's have a look at the subscriber. Security sample is now there. If I click on local subscriptions, I expect to see that there now. There it is, view synchronization status, and that is happily being created. If I look at the properties, you can see the size of the database, 258 megs, but there is 247 megabytes free. So that effectively means that the database, at the point where I right-clicked and said properties, was only 11 megabytes in size. Launch replication monitor. Does this show us any information? We can see that the snapshot agents are there. Let's have a look at the log reader agents. 3 transactions were delivered. So on the Knowledge Vault Master, changes would have been committed, because in the Knowledge Vault Master knows about which databases are enabled on the subscriber and which ones have file stores. So when we make a change like this, information needs to be synchronized for the Knowledge Vault Master. We have an interesting message here. So we've got a notification saying that the performance is critical on the PDMC database. So we can have a look, view details. It appears to be running. There's no information waiting to be sent over. Everything should be there. View details, undistributed commands. So this database is still being written over to the subscriber, and SQL believes that it could be 19 minutes before that is now complete. But let's come in here again. That 19 minutes went pretty quick. It's now complete. So this database, all 4 databases, should now be 100% copied over and built on the subscriber. We can't verify that right now because we can't log into the ADMS console, so no users can access them. But as far as the database is concerned, everything is there at the moment. So whilst the Vault server is still installing, let's just do a review of what's happened. So we went to Manage Replication. To manage replication, you right-click on the new subscriber and you select Manage Replication. But you can also right-click on the properties. Clicking on the properties allows us to change the name and label of the work group, and we can also change the password of the remote replication user account. Clicking on Manage Replication on the subscriber will display a list of databases that are on the publisher but have not yet been replicated to the subscriber. One or more databases can be selected on the left, then by clicking the right button, they are then ready to be replicated. When we clicked OK, SQL was instructed to generate a new snapshot for each database. Each database has its own snapshot agent. The snapshot agent will generate a snapshot for each database. At the same time, a log reader agent is created for each database. Each log reader agent will then scan its database continuously. If any changes now happen to any of those databases, they will be written to the distribution database ready to be consumed by a subscriber. On the subscriber, a distribution agent is created for each database. That distribution agent will first read the scripts it finds in the SQL shared folder for its database and executes those scripts. The subscriber's databases are created from those scripts and populated with the same schema and data as the original databases on the publisher. Once the snapshot has been fully consumed, the distribution agent will stop reading the snapshot folder and switch its attention to the distribution server for any updates that have occurred since the snapshot was created. A review of what's just happened. On the publisher, a log reader agent has been installed for each database that's been published. Snapshot agents have also been created for each publication. Snapshots for each published database have been created. These are now ready to be consumed by any new subscriber. On the new subscriber, a distribution agent has been created for each subscription. These agents will talk to the distribution server continuously. If there are any changes, they will immediately detect them and copy them to the subscriber's database. We're currently going through the process of installing Vault Server. So, in fact, if we were to log into Vault Server at the moment, this is the error message that we would, or it's not an error message, it's just a message saying all existing vaults are disabled at this site. To enable Vault, right-click on the vault and select Enable. So this is just reinforcing to the administrator that when you log into the ADMS console for the first time, the databases are replicated over to the subscriber, but as far as Vault is concerned, they're not enabled because we haven't told we haven't told SQL, or we haven't told Vault where we want those databases to be located. So what we would do is we would right click on each vault and we would enable each vault on its own. Vault will prompt us for the file store location. We can choose the default file store location, or we can choose a custom location. If the file store does not already exist locally, Vault's file store replication will sync the files based on file replication settings, which is covered in another class. So that is about everything that I wanted to talk about. What I will do now is I will wait for this Vault server installation to finish, and then we will go through the process of enabling those databases. Now that we've finally got through the installation and the startup, we have this message saying all existing vaults are disabled at this site. To enable a vault, right click on the vault and select Vault enabled. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I right click on here on the first database, I can say Vault enabled, and I don't have the file store here, so if I just select the default file store location, I can click OK, and I need to repeat that for every database. Okay, that vault is now enabled, and you'll see that the icon now changes. So we can just repeat that for the others. It's a perfectly accepted practice to manually copy the file store over from the publisher. It can save time if you can do that in advance, or even if there's a week or 2 weeks difference between you copying the file store from the publisher to the subscriber. Vault is clever enough, when you enable the file store or enable the Vault, it will look in the existing file store and it will go through and it will check the checksum on every single file, and if the checksum matches the database, then it will leave the file there. If the checksum doesn't match the database, it will delete that using this process called the vacuum cleaner. So if you have a very large file store, it can save you a lot of time by copying that over first. Enabled. Okay, and now users can log into all of these databases, and that concludes the labs on how to set up Autodesk Vaults Connected Workgroups. Thank you for your attention.